Ralph Neville, 1st Earl of Westmorland, 4th Baron Neville de Raby, KGPC. Earl Marshal, was an English nobleman of the House of Neville family. Ralph Neville was born about 1364, the son of John Neville, 3rd Baron Neville de Raby, and Maud Percy, daughter of Henry de Percy, 2nd Baron Percy of Alnwick, Northumberland, by Antoine de Clifford, daughter of Robert de Clifford, 1st Baron de Clifford. Neville had a younger brother and 5 sisters: Thomas Neville, 5th Baron Furnivall, who married Joan Furnivall; Lady Alice Neville, who married Sir Thomas Grey; Lady Maud Neville; Lady Edwin Neville; Lady Eleanor Neville, who married Ralph de Lumley, 1st Baron Lumley; Lady Elizabeth Neville, who became a nun. Neville's father married secondly, before the 9th of October 1381, Elizabeth Latimer, daughter of William Latimer, 4th Baron Latimer. By his father's second marriage Neville had a brother and sister of the half-blood, John Neville, 6th Baron Latimer, who married firstly Maud Clifford, daughter of Thomas Clifford, 6th Baron Clifford, whom he divorced before 1413–17, and by whom he had no issue. She married secondly Richard of Conersburgh, 3rd Earl of Cambridge, beheaded the 5th of August 1415 for his part in the Southampton plot; Lady Elizabeth Neville, who married Sir Thomas Willoughby. Career. Neville's first military service was in Brittany under King Richard II's uncle, Thomas of Woodstock, who knighted him at St. Omer in July 1380. On the 14th of November 1381 he and his cousin, Henry Hotspur Percy, were commissioned to preside over a duel between an Englishman and a Scot, and on the 1st of December 1383 he and his father were commissioned to receive from the Scots 24,000 marks for the ransom of King David. On the 26th of October 1385 he was appointed joint governor of Carlisle with Sir Thomas Clifford, and on the 27th of March 1386 was appointed, together with Clifford, joint warden of the West March. Neville inherited the title at the age of 24 after his father's death on the 17th of October 1388, and was summoned to Parliament from the 6th of December 1389 to the 30th of November 1396 by writs directed to Radolfo de Neville de Raby. On the 25th of October 1388 he was appointed, with others, to survey the fortifications on the Scottish border, and on the 24th of May 1389 was made keeper for life of the Royal Forest north of the Trent. In 1393 and 1394 he was employed in peace negotiations with Scotland. In 1397 Neville supported King Richard's proceedings against Thomas of Woodstock in the Lords Appellant, and by way of reward was created Earl of Westmorland on the 29th of September of that year. However, his loyalty to the king was tested shortly thereafter. His first wife, Margaret Stafford, had died on the 9th of June 1396, and Neville's second marriage to Joan Beaufort before the 29th of November 1396 made him the son-in-law of King Richard's uncle, John of Gaunt, 1st Duke of Lancaster. Thus, when King Richard banished John of Gaunt's eldest son and heir, Henry Bolingbroke, on the 16th of September 1398, and confiscated Bolingbroke's estates after John of Gaunt's death on the 3rd of February 1399, Westmorland was moved to support his brother-in-law. Bolingbroke landed with a small force at Ravenspur in July 1399. Westmorland and the Earl of Northumberland were in the deputation at the Tower, which received King Richard's abdication, and Westmorland bore the small sceptre called the Verge at Bolingbroke's coronation as King Henry IV on the 13th of October 1399. For his support of the new king, Westmorland was rewarded with a lifetime appointment as Earl Marshal on the 30th of September 1399. A lifetime grant of the honour of Richmond on the 20th of October, and several wardships. Before the 4th of December he was appointed to the King's Council. In March 1401, Westmoreland was one of the commissioners who conducted negotiations for a marriage between the King's eldest daughter, Blanche of England, and Louis, son of Rupert, King of the Romans, and in 1403 was made a Knight of the Garter, taking the place left vacant by the death of Edmund of Langley, 1st Duke of York. According to Tuck, Westmoreland had little influence on the Scottish borders in the first years of Henry IV's reign, where the wardenships of the Marches were monopolised by the Percys, leading to a growing rivalry between the two families. However, in 1403 the Percys, spurred on by various grievances, took up arms against the king, and suffered defeat at the Battle of Shrewsbury on the 21st of July 1403. Northumberland's son, Henry Hotspur Percy, was slain at Shrewsbury, and Northumberland's brother, the Earl of Worcester, was beheaded 2 days later. After Shrewsbury, King Henry ordered Westmoreland to raise troops and prevent Northumberland's army, which was still in the north, from advancing south. On the 6th of August 1403, as a reward for his service in driving Northumberland back to Warkworth Castle, Westmoreland was granted the wardenship of the West March, which Northumberland had held since 1399, the wardenship of the East March, formerly held by Henry Hotspur Percy, being granted to the king's 14-year-old son, John of Lancaster, 1st Duke of Bedford. 2 years later Northumberland, joined by Lord Bardolph, again took up arms against the king. It had been Northumberland's plan to capture the Earl by surprise at the outset, and in early May 1405, with 400 men, Northumberland made a surprise attack at the castle of Wittenlow, where he had been staying. The attempt failed, as Westmoreland had already fled. The Earl speedily gathered an army, defeated a force of Percy allies at Top Cliff, and then marched towards York with Henry IV's son, John of Lancaster, to confront a force of some 8,000 men gathered on Shipton Moor under the leadership of Archbishop Richard Scrope, Thomas de Mowbray, 4th Earl of Norfolk, and Scrope's nephew, Sir William Plumpton. Outnumbered by Scrope's forces, Westmoreland resorted to trickery, and led Scrope and his allies to believe that their demands would be accepted and their personal safety guaranteed. Once Scrope's army had been disbanded on the 29th of May, Scrope, Mowbray and Plumpton were arrested, summarily condemned to death for treason, and beheaded outside the walls of York on the 8th of June 1405. Although Westmoreland handed Scrope and his allies over to the king at Pontefract, he played no role in the hasty and irregular trial and execution, having been sent north by the king on the 4th of June to seize Northumberland's castles. It is unclear whether Northumberland had initially planned to rebel openly in concert with Scrope, but in the event he gave Scrope no support, and fled to Scotland after his failed attempt to capture Westmoreland. His estates were subsequently forfeited to the crown, and Ralph, Earl of Westmoreland, as a reward for his quelling of the 1405 rebellion without significant bloodshed, received a large grant of former Percy lands in Cumberland and Northumberland in June 1405. After the death of Henry IV, Westmoreland was mainly engaged in the defence of the northern border in his capacity as Warden of the West March. In 1415 he decisively defeated an invading Scottish army at the Battle of Yevering. Westmoreland played no part in King Henry V's French campaigns, and Tuck notes that his relationship with Henry V was not close, perhaps partly because of the involvement of Westmoreland's son-in-law, Sir Thomas Grey of Heaton, in the Southampton plot. After Henry V's death, Westmoreland was a member of the Council of Regency during the minority of King Henry VI. According to Tate, Westmoreland was no inconsiderable builder, citing his rebuilding of Sheriff Hutton Castle on a scale so magnificent that Leland saw no house in the north so like a princely lodging, his doubling of the entrance gateway of Raby Castle and the corresponding tower, and possibly his responsibility for the tall and striking tower of Richmond Parish Church. On the 1st of November 1410, Westmoreland was granted license to found a college for a master, 6 clerks, 6 decayed gentlemen, and others at Staindrop, towards the completion of which he left a bequest in his will. He was probably responsible for the building of Penrith Castle in Cumberland c. 1412–13. Marriages and issue. Neville married firstly Margaret Stafford, the eldest daughter of Hugh Stafford, 2nd Earl of Stafford, and Philippa Beauchamp, the daughter of Thomas Beauchamp, 11th Earl of Warwick, by Catherine Mortimer, the daughter of Roger Mortimer, 1st Earl of March. They had 2 sons and 6 daughters. Sir John Neville, who married Elizabeth Holland, 5th daughter of Thomas Holland, 2nd Earl of Kent, and Alice Fitzalan, and by her had 3 sons. Ralph Neville, 2nd Earl of Westmoreland, John Neville, Baron Neville, and Sir Thomas Neville, and a daughter, Margaret Neville. Sir Ralph Neville, who married, before 1411, his stepsister, Mary Ferrers, daughter of Robert Ferrers, 2nd Baron Ferrers, and Joan Beaufort. Maud Neville, who married Peter de Morley, 5th Baron Morley. Alice Neville, who married firstly Sir Thomas Grey, beheaded the 2nd of August 1415 for his part in the Southampton plot, and secondly Sir Gilbert Lancaster. Philippa Neville, who married, before the 20th of July 1399, Thomas Dacre, 6th Baron Dacre of Gilsland. Elizabeth Neville, who became a nun. Anne Neville, who married, before the 3rd of February 1413, Sir Gilbert Umfreville, son of Sir Thomas Umfreville, and Agnes Grey, daughter of Sir Thomas Grey of Heaton. He was slain at the Battle of Barray in Anjou on the 22nd of March 1421. Margaret Neville, who married firstly, before the 31st of December 1413, Richard Scrope, 3rd Baron Scrope of Bolton, and secondly, William Cresner, Esquire. Neville married secondly, before the 29th of November 1396, at Château de Beaufort, Maine-et-Loire, Anjou, Joan Beaufort, the widow of Robert Ferrers, 2nd Baron Ferrers. Joan was the legitimated daughter of John of Gaunt, 1st Duke of Lancaster, by his mistress and later third wife, Catherine Swynford. They had 9 sons and 5 daughters. Richard Neville, 5th Earl of Salisbury, married Alice Montacute, 5th Countess of Salisbury. The son was Richard Neville, 16th Earl of Warwick, the Kingmaker. Henry Neville, Thomas Neville, Cuthbert Neville, Robert Neville, Bishop of Salisbury and Durham. William Neville, 1st Earl of Kent. John Neville, George Neville, 1st Baron Latimer, Edward Neville, 3rd Baron Bigaveny. Joan Neville, who became a nun. Catherine Neville, married firstly on the 12th of January 1411 to John Mowbray, 2nd Duke of Norfolk, secondly to Sir Thomas Strangways, thirdly to John Beaumont, 1st Viscount Beaumont, fourthly to Sir John Woodville. Eleanor Neville, married firstly to Richard Le Despencer, 4th Baron Burgish, secondly to Henry Percy, 2nd Earl of Northumberland. Anne Neville, married firstly to Humphrey Stafford, 1st Duke of Buckingham, secondly to Walter Blunt, 1st Baron Mountjoy. Cecily Neville, married to Richard, 3rd Duke of York. She was the mother of King Edward IV and King Richard III. Westmoreland died on the 21st of October 1425. He was buried in the choir of his collegiate church of St. Mary at Staindrop, the magnificent alabaster tomb with effigies of himself and his 2 wives that has been termed the finest sepulchral monument in the north of England. Neither of his wives is buried with him. His first wife, Margaret Stafford, was buried at Brancepeth, Durham, while his second wife, Joan Beaufort, was buried with her mother under a carved stone canopy in the sanctuary of Lincoln Cathedral. Westmoreland was predeceased by his eldest son, Sir John Neville, and was succeeded in the title by his grandson, Ralph Neville, 2nd Earl of Westmoreland. Shakespeare in Westmoreland. Westmoreland is portrayed in Shakespeare's Henry IV, Part 1, Henry IV, Part 2, and Henry V. In the opening scene of Henry IV, Part 1, Westmoreland is presented historically as an ally of King Henry IV against the Percys, and in the final scenes of the play as being dispatched to the north of England by the king after the Battle of Shrewsbury to intercept the Earl of Northumberland. In Act 4 of Henry IV, Part 2, Westmoreland is portrayed historically as having been principally responsible for quelling the Percy rebellion in 1405 by Archbishop Scrope almost without bloodshed by successfully parleying with the rebels on the 29th of May 1405 at Shipton Moor. However, in Henry V, Westmoreland is unhistorically alleged to have resisted the arguments made in favour of war with France by Archbishop Chichele in the Parliament which began at Leicester on the 30th of April 1414. Following Hall and Holinshead, Shakespeare attributes these arguments to Chichele at a time when Chichele was not yet formally archbishop, although he had been appointed by the king immediately following the death of Archbishop Arundel on the 14th of February 1414. Moreover, it is said that the parliamentary rolls do not record Chichele's presence, and according to Tate the question of war with France was not discussed. In addition, Westmoreland's speech urging the advantages of war against Scotland rather than France is said to be adapted from a work by the Scottish historian John Major, who was not born until half a century after the 1414 Parliament. The first folio text of Henry V also and historically gives these lines to Westmoreland on the eve of Agincourt: "Oh that we now had here but 1/10,000 of those men in England that do no work today." Westmoreland was not with King Henry V on the 1415 campaign in France. On the 17th of April 1415 he was appointed to the Council of Regency which was to govern England under the king's brother, John of Lancaster, 1st Duke of Bedford, during the king's absence in France, with special responsibility for the Scottish marches. In the first quarto text of the play, the foregoing lines are assigned to the Earl of Warwick. It has been claimed by Brenda James and Professor William Rubinstein that Neville's great-great-great-grandson Sir Henry Neville read the works of William Shakespeare. Ancestry.